Hello, good morning. My name is Malik Mnela, welcoming you to the first tutorial in a series of tutorials that we'll be giving you on thrifty broadcasts. This is a crash course for journalists, and we are trying to provide solutions that will enable journalists embrace technology that will help them better execute their duties in informing the masses, especially in African countries. So in this presentation, we will be talking about a number of issues, and the expected outcome is that journalists should be able to create high quality, stable broadcasts between two or more points over the internet using free, absolutely free and readily available resources. By free, we mean open source software that is available for free. Anybody can access them on Android, on iOS, as well as on MacBook, as well as Windows computers. And by readily available resources, what I mean is these are resources that will not require an extra or special budget. That means that with the resources that you already have, you should be able to create high quality, stable broadcasts between two or more points over the internet using free and readily available resources. Now, the introduction is basically what I have already illustrated in my opening remarks. Now that we have that out of the way, perhaps we should now go to unveiling the apps. Having unveiled the apps, we will now talk about the SRT, the SRT technology, which is secure, reliable transport, which comes into the mix and is basically the spinal cord of the whole system that we'll be unveiling. And we will also be talking about the apps installation. This is key because it will, in a way, show us or demonstrate how the applications are going to be installed on various equipment that we'll be using. And obviously, by the time we are concluding this presentation, we are going to be talking about how to go live. Actually, we are going to install the apps, configure them, as well as go live with those particular apps. Now, talking about the applications, when you are doing point-to-point kind of broadcast, you need to create a network. Usually, this would require accessing a public IP address. This public IP address will enable you to broadcast from one point to another. For you to access a public IP would require that you talk to your service provider, and it's not really an easy task in most cases. You have to pay in some instances, and it's really not easy to access a public IP. But technology has presented various opportunities that have enabled anybody else access a wide area network utilizing applications that have been developed. In a series of these tutorials, we are going to talk about several such applications. But in this particular case, we are using an application known as Tailscale. If you can see on the screen there, you realize that Tailscale is an all-inclusive free solution. Of course, they are paid for tiers, but for our use case, in this particular case, we are going to use it for free. It is going to create a software-defined local area network. It can also, or rather it will also develop a software-defined wide area network. In a way, it's a VPN, and there is also a facility known as Taildrop, and we're going to discuss or talk about how Taildrop can really be utilized by journalists who are doing their remote broadcast. Another software that we are talking about is the OBS. OBS is a software that is free, and this software is important because in as much as it is free, it is a highly recommended AV encoder as well as decoder. So you can really utilize this for graphics overlays, receiving remote signal, and streaming to various CDNs such as Facebook, YouTube, or indeed websites. So this one will need to be installed on your computer, whether it's an Apple, a MacBook, or a Windows machine. Now, we are using what we call mobile journalism. So, as we are using mobile journalism, we are going to use mobile phones. So on our mobile phones, we are going to use an application that is a remote camera app of choice in most outside broadcast. Why? It is because this one has potential to create high quality broadcasts. It is reliable, and it's an excellent audiovisual decoder as well as encoder. It is called Larix Broadcaster, and it bears the symbol or the logo as you see on the picture on the screen. Now, these three applications, Tailscale, OBS, and Larix Broadcaster, are the only softwares that we are going to utilize in developing this tutorial, as well as having a cocktail for low-cost remote broadcasting for African journalists. So once you have installed your Tailscale on your phone, or rather on your phones, whether Android or iOS, and computers, you also need to install your OBS on the studio computer. And on the phone, in addition to the Tailscale, you also need to have Larix Broadcaster. So Tailscale will basically be on all the resources that we are going to use. The phones and the computers that are going to be used need to have Tailscale installed, and they need to have Tailscale configured so that there is a network, a virtual network that is created between all these gadgets. And then in our studio, we need to have OBS ready to receive signal from Larix Broadcaster. Now, this Larix Broadcaster is installed on the phones that will be used to send signal to OBS. Now, how is this magic going to happen? It is going to happen because of the technology known as Secure Reliable Transport. Now, Secure Reliable Transport is a royalty-free open source video streaming transport protocol that delivers secure, low latency streaming performance over noisy or unpredictable networks such as public internet. In this case, we're using the public internet, which is quite congested, and as a result, you'll find out that signal is a bit scratched in some cases. That scratching is because of the lost packets whilst the streaming is in the process. Now, what happens using the Secure Reliable Transport is that it ensures that there is enough buffer so that it collects all the lost packets and repackage them so that they are seen without any of those scratches on your video. So we now have the Tailscale configured. We also have the Larix Broadcaster configured. Now, the question now is whether we are going to use mobile phone to stream to OBS. Then the question is, what kind of mobile phone are we using? The better the phone that you're using, the better the result. Most recent phones tend to do better because they've got better cameras, but also they have got better battery power rather, and that in a way will determine how good it is. Now, the core functions of the chosen apps, like I said earlier on, the Tailscale is used for networking. So we are going to obtain IP addresses of all PCs and iOS, and these gadgets can also be used as a back-end transmitter of supplementary data such as B-roll footage and pictures through the Taildrop facility. I'm going to demonstrate that a little bit later. The Larix broadcaster's function is to be the remote camera which will contribute the audiovisual content from the remote location to the OBS in the studio using the Tailscale assigned IP addresses. The OBS will ingest the SRT feed that is coming from the Larix broadcaster camera. So it will encode and then decode the video, and then we can publish to wherever we want to publish. So how do we configure these applications for the broadcast? So we are going to obtain the Tailscale assigned IP addresses of all the computers and iOS gadgets or Android gadgets that we are using. Whilst listing these, we need to be sure and certain that we are assigning a correct IP address to a correct gadget, because that will be very, very important in how we deploy our resources. In the Larix broadcaster, you are going to open and ensure that this particular camera is the primary source. Now, when you go to configure the destination, you are going to write as is appearing on that presentation there, SRT://, then you place in your Tailscale assigned IP address of your studio computer, then you assign a port number. Ports tend to be tricky, because sometimes if you are using a highly secure system, you would have your ports closed. So you need to do a little bit of port forwarding and all that, but you need not to worry, because Tailscale will handle most of these. For instance, if you use port 5,000 or maybe 6,000, in some cases 10,000, you should be able to penetrate into OBS, which is a production hub. Now, in your OBS configuration, you will go to media source. Media source, then you will add this same IP address, which will be the IP address of the particular computer that you are using. And this IP address should be the one that has been granted through Tailscale. And you're going to put the port number, the very port number that you have chosen in the Larix broadcaster setup. Once you do that, you will need to note that at the end of the port number, you will need to put a question mark, mod =, listener. That should be enough in some cases. But where you need to configure latency, the latency is the delay between the time the video is captured and the time the video is received. Now, there is an advantage in the delay, because when you delay it, it means that the signal will be much more reliable in terms of its stability. So if you put, for instance, 1 millisecond or 1 second, you can then continue beyond the listener. You put the and sign, then latency equals the number of microseconds or seconds that you would need to have at the end there. So if you want, for instance, 1 second, then it will have to be 1 million. Now, having gone through the setup, we now talk about the bonus tip. This is TalkBack. Now, whilst you are in the studio, you will not be able to transmit your signal to the one who is in a remote location. But fortunately, the Larix broadcaster is created in such a way that it would allow the TalkBack configuration to be set. In this case, you go back to Larix broadcaster, you choose TalkBack, then having chosen TalkBack, you put in the phone, the IP address of the phone that you are using to transmit signal to the studio. Then you configure it into listener mode, because in this case, unlike in the first instance, this time around, it is listening to whatever is being said in the studio. Once you do that, you save, and by the time the stream, then you go to OBS. The OBS, the very OBS that is being used to receive the signal that is being sent from Larix broadcaster. In the stream settings, you have to ensure that you put in the SRT / phone IP address, and this time around, please make sure that if you used a different port, for example, you use 5000 in transmitting signal out of the Larix broadcaster, then you have to change the port number for Larix to receive signal from the OBS computer. Now, in this case, the port number, for instance, can be 5500. The inputting SRT address should have a different port number to the receiving port number. That is very, very important. But then also in OBS, we need to ensure that so in OBS, there is a tricky part. OBS only has one destination to stream to, but there is a workaround for that. You will need to install plugins, and these plugins will enable you to stream to multiple destinations. The very, very important thing is that once you have that plugin installed, you should be able to stream to multiple locations. So this plugin is very, very important, because without it, this trick may not work for you. So you will need to go to the OBS website and find a plugin called OBS Multi-RTMP. OBS Multi-RTMP. Now, this plugin will allow you to stream to Facebook, YouTube, whilst at the same time transmitting signal to your remote reporter wherever they may be. So this is the bonus tip number 1. Bonus tip number 2 is the use of Tailscale. Tailscale has something that we call the tail drop. Tail drop is a facility that will enable you shoot videos and transmit them immediately to any gadget that is on your network, almost immediately, without taking time to download, as would be the case when you're using the computer. Now, this particular facility is very, very important if you want to use certain video clips as B-roll, B-roll, or you may wish to send some pictures for them to be used on social media platforms whilst the news is still, at its breaking stage. So this is a very, very important facility for journalists, because the B-roll footage can be used as overlays whilst you are providing your live report. So immediately the footage that you have submitted through the tail drop is received on the computer, the one in the control room should be able to access it and put it into the broadcast almost immediately, thereby allowing to switch between the footage that has just been sent and the reporter that is reporting live at that particular time. Well, that's it for today, and I hope you have learned one thing or two in this broadcast. I think you will enjoy this broadcast, and if you have learned a thing or two, please remember to share with colleagues that are in the media, especially in the broadcast sector, so that they learn a thing or two. Well, contact details are shown on screen. You're welcome to contact me for any feedback or advice in case you face challenges. Until the next tutorial, bye for now.